I'm in the files for not going.
She went on to have sex with you.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of girls.
Seems very dark. That was going on for
so long.
Jeffrey Epstein was trying to meet with me, and I was like, what?
Joe Rogan didn't introduce new evidence. He did something arguably more powerful. He said the quiet part out loud. On his podcast, Rogan revisited the Jeffrey Epstein case and openly questioned how so many high-profile figures ended up in Epstein's orbit. He acknowledged his own brief encounter with Epstein, saying he regretted ever stepping into the same room. That admission set the tone. This wasn't about proving new crimes. It was about confronting the scale of association. Epstein, a convicted sex offender who died in federal custody in 2019, moved for years among billionaires, politicians, scientists, and royalty. Rogan's central question was simple. How does someone with Epstein's background gain repeated access to the most powerful people in the world? He described the situation as a rabbit hole, arguing that the case exposes deeper connections between government, private wealth, and influence networks. Rogan stopped short of claiming proof of a coordinated operation, but he suggested the pattern was too extensive to dismiss as coincidence. He also reflected on how early warnings about Epstein's private island once sounded absurd. Years ago, claims about powerful figures gathering there were widely dismissed as fringe speculation. After Epstein's 2019 arrest and subsequent investigations, many of those earlier claims were partially confirmed, at least regarding who visited or communicated with him. But Rogan's larger point wasn't about any single name. It was about the system that allowed Epstein to operate for decades. He framed Epstein not as an isolated predator, but as someone embedded within elite circles. That framing reopened an uncomfortable question. If Epstein existed, surrounded by influence and protection, how many others operate in similar shadows? The files, the flight logs, the testimonies. Rogan argued they tell a story not just about one man, but about access. And that's where the controversy begins.
One of Epstein's accusers, Virginia Roberts,
Yeah.
has made allegations against you. She says she met you in 2001. She says she dined with you, danced with you at Tramp nightclub in London. She went on to have sex with you in a house in Belgravia belonging to Ghislaine Maxwell, your friend. Your response?
I have no recollection of ever meeting this lady. None whatsoever.
You don't remember meeting her.
The problem was the fact that once he had been convicted,
You stayed with
I stayed with him. And that's the bit that, as it were, I kick myself for on a daily basis, because it was not something that was becoming of a member of the royal family. And we try and uphold the highest standards and practices, and I let the side down. Simple as that.
After Epstein's death, court documents and investigative files continued to surface through lawsuits, Freedom of Information Act requests, and unsealed federal records. These releases did not introduce sweeping new criminal charges against high-profile figures, but they did confirm something significant. Epstein's contact network was vast. Flight logs from his private jet, often referred to as the Lolita Express, had already shown that former President Bill Clinton flew on the aircraft multiple times. Clinton has repeatedly stated he never visited Epstein's private island and was unaware of Epstein's crimes. Prince Andrew's association with Epstein also became a global scandal, culminating in a civil settlement in 2022 related to allegations he has denied. Business leaders and public figures also appeared in Epstein's contact books and email exchanges. Bill Gates publicly acknowledged meeting Epstein several times after Epstein's 2008 conviction, later calling those meetings a mistake. Gates has denied any involvement in criminal behavior and stated he never visited Epstein's island. What made the newer document releases controversial wasn't proof of coordinated wrongdoing. It was repetition. The same names resurfaced across flight manifests, meeting schedules, and social calendars over multiple years. That consistency fueled public suspicion, even when no charges followed. In some cases, communications showed assistance arranging meetings or introductions. In others, it was simply proof of proximity emails, calendar invites, shared events. Legally, association is not guilt, but politically and culturally, repeated association carries weight. Rogan focused on that tension. If so many influential people later claimed Epstein was manipulative or deceptive, why did the relationships continue for years? Why did contact persist after his first conviction? The documents raised questions about judgment, access, and influence. They did not provide a definitive master list of criminal participants. They did, however, demonstrate that Epstein operated openly within elite circles long after red flags were visible. And that pattern led directly to one of the most scrutinized relationships of all.
Dinners with him, hoping that what he said about getting billions of philanthropy for global health through contacts that he had might emerge. When it looked like that wasn't a real thing, that relationship ended. But it was a huge mistake to spend time with him, to give him the credibility of there were lots of others in that same situation, but I made a mistake. Definitely a very sad milestone. Was a great person, and that partnership that we had coming to an end is a source of great personal sadness. We are dating and working at the foundation, and so that partnership we're going to try and continue.
One of the most closely examined relationships was between Jeffrey Epstein and Bill Gates. Gates met with Epstein multiple times, beginning around 2011. Several years after Epstein's 2008 conviction for soliciting prostitution from a minor. Emails later obtained through reporting showed discussions about philanthropy and global health initiatives. Gates has acknowledged those meetings, calling them a serious error in judgment. He has repeatedly denied any involvement in criminal conduct and stated he never visited Epstein's private island. The controversy deepened because the meetings continued over time. Critics questioned why one of the world's most prominent tech leaders would maintain contact with a convicted sex offender. Gates's explanation has remained consistent. He believed Epstein could help connect wealthy donors to global health projects, and he now regrets that decision. Melinda French Gates later spoke publicly about meeting Epstein once. She described the encounter as deeply unsettling and said she regretted it immediately. In interviews following her divorce from Bill Gates in 2021, she acknowledged that his association with Epstein contributed to the strain in their marriage. This pattern repeated beyond Gates. Several individuals whose names appeared in Epstein's contact books or communications later described him as manipulative, persistent, and eager to attach himself to influential circles. Some suggested he exaggerated his financial power or philanthropic role to gain credibility, but Rogan pushed back on the idea that everyone was simply fooled. His argument wasn't that every person listed committed crimes. It was that sustained access at that level rarely happens by accident. Epstein wasn't just attending parties. He was securing meetings, arranging introductions, and positioning himself among decision makers. And that raised a more provocative question. Was he acting entirely alone?
You met Jeffrey Epstein once.
Yep.
Talk to me about what that's like, coming face to face with somebody of that caliber.
Whatever that means. One thing is that there is a physiological reaction that corresponds to this phrase that the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. That's a real physiological feeling. I don't know whether the hair actually does that, but it's exactly what it feels like. You're meeting somebody who is unholy. One of the most interesting things is that he was beckoning into a world that didn't seem to exist but for him as the doormat. I think that's one of the things that freaked out a lot of these rich people is that he felt rich in a movie sense, which is not something that you find among actually rich people.
That question is where Joe Rogan's conversation shifted from documented facts to speculation. Rogan floated a theory that has circulated for years, that Epstein may have functioned as a fixer or intelligence asset, someone positioned between powerful individuals and government institutions. He made clear he had no direct proof, but he argued that Epstein's unexplained wealth, global access, and social reach were difficult to reconcile with the public story of a former finance manager acting independently. Epstein presented himself as a financier, yet details about the origin of his fortune have always been opaque. While he managed money for wealthy clients, the full structure of his finances was never publicly clarified. That mystery has fueled years of speculation. Rogan referenced conversations with intellectuals like Eric Weinstein, who previously questioned whether Epstein was a construct, a person elevated beyond his visible credentials. Others have speculated, without verified evidence, about possible ties to intelligence agencies. No government agency has confirmed such a connection. The theory goes like this. Powerful people are invited into private environments where compromising behavior can occur. That material, in turn, becomes leverage. Rogan emphasized that this is a hypothesis, not established fact. Still, he argued that blackmail operations are not unheard of in global politics, and that Epstein's documented habit of recording visitors raises uncomfortable questions. Federal investigators have never publicly confirmed the existence of a coordinated blackmail ring tied to Epstein. Ghislaine Maxwell, his longtime associate, was convicted in 2021 for her role in recruiting and grooming underage girls. Beyond that, no broader conspiracy has been legally established, but the perception remains powerful. If Epstein cultivated access at the highest levels, was it purely social ambition or something more strategic? That uncertainty feeds directly into the next controversy: transparency.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of girls. And I'm speaking just from what I know as Florida girls and finding out more and coming together, you know, you start to see the pattern and how many girls that haven't came forward. I mean, it could have protected hundreds and hundreds of young girls and women. And it's very sad that they didn't take that seriously. And there is documentation where their reporters tried to report on that back then or a little bit later on, and it was shut down by different news networks or magazines and stuff. So Jeffrey changed that narrative and didn't want that out there. So that's also a reminder, and there is documentation to that too. So it's like, release all of it. There's so much more behind this than what people know, and it's really scary that it keeps dragging out more and more.
The final layer of the controversy isn't about one individual, it's about transparency. Since Epstein's 2019 arrest and death, thousands of pages of court records have been unsealed through civil litigation and public pressure. Some releases clarified timelines and associations. Others were heavily redacted to protect victims in ongoing investigations. The Department of Justice has stated that many sensitive materials, including graphic evidence and identifying details, cannot be publicly disclosed for legal and privacy reasons. Still, critics argue the pace and structure of disclosures have fueled distrust. Documents emerged in waves, often months apart, with names appearing in different contexts. Each new batch reignited speculation, even when no criminal charges followed. No comprehensive client list has been publicly confirmed by federal authorities. Officials have maintained that investigations focused on prosecutable offenses, not publishing social registries. Beyond Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, no additional high-profile criminal indictments have been filed directly tied to his trafficking case. For Rogan, that gap between public expectation and official closure is the core tension. If Epstein operated at the highest levels of wealth and politics, many people assume more accountability should follow. When it doesn't, suspicion grows. But suspicion is not proof. The record shows Epstein cultivated extraordinary access. It shows powerful people associated with him, sometimes repeatedly. It shows failures of oversight that allowed him to operate for years. What it does not conclusively show is a fully exposed network with confirmed criminal participation across elite institutions. And that unresolved space between documented association and unanswered questions is why the Epstein story refuses to disappear. If Epstein's power came from access alone, what does that say about the systems that protected him for so long? And who, if anyone, should still be held accountable? Share your thoughts below and click the next video to dive even deeper into another powerful figure whose connections raised serious questions of their own.